Welcome to the live Instagram with Chansen, so I'm glad to be here. Today we are going to discuss about the importance of self-regulated learning with online learning, and we have time to introduce the guest of today. She's going to join shortly. So the guest is joining. Hi, Dr. Otieno.
Hello, Ella. How are you? Thank you for having me, and hello, everyone who is joined us.
Thank you so much for joining. I'm very happy to host you tonight.
Thank you. My pleasure. It's all my pleasure too.
Yes. So I was telling the audience that we're very honored, and it's a pleasure to host you tonight. And as we be talking about the importance of self-regulated learning with online learning. So for those that don't know Dr. Otieno, she's the director. She's the director of the training teacher program in Rwanda at AIMS, and she holds a PhD in mathematics, education, and a master's in sociology, policy, and planning from Sheffield Hallam University in the UK. And Dr. Otieno has a keen interest in contributing to improving the teaching, learning, and assessment of STEM in African schools and institutions of higher learning. Welcome again, Dr. Otieno. It's a great pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Ella. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes, I don't know if you have something you would like to say before starting our conversation.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ella. I'm really at home because I believe this is a conversation that's going to happen about self-regulated learning, as you have said. I have a PhD in mathematics education, and actually the focus of my research was on self-regulated learning. And I'm really excited that we're having this conversation with the students in the context of online learning. I want to just appreciate Chansen for thinking about this, because I think it is part of what has been missing in the conversation since we started promoting online learning, especially in this pandemic, because it's one thing to tell students or to actually find ourselves having to do online learning. It's another thing to build the skills and the capacity and even the thinking or pattern to be able to do so. And I believe out of this conversation, those are some of the things that we'll be exploring. So I really find it useful and helpful that Chansen thought about this as part of empowering and building capacity of your students. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Otieno. So as you were saying, this has been a focus for your PhD research, and I'd like to start with my first question. What does self-regulated learning mean?
So thank you for that question. So it's, as you can imagine, I have over 80,000 words on self-regulated learning in my thesis, but I'm going to try and make it, and try to explain what it really means, because it's something that we engage in every day. And part of the reason why I found myself doing something about it is because as a student, right from when I was young, I actually grew up in a way that I always kind of applied self-regulated learning. So when you think about self-regulated learning, I think that the three words are very important. Self. So think about myself. And so I am learning, and in this particular learning process, I am more in charge. So the learning is driven by me. And in the process of it being driven by me, then I'm going to control a lot of things that would allow me to learn. So we normally talk about, when you're talking about self-regulated learning, we're talking about the student being actively in charge of his or her learning, and that may require or should require her to have some plan that the student puts in place for her learning. And in the process of the learning, it will require you to monitor, control, and regulate. Keep ensuring that things are in the right place. So you'll be monitoring, controlling, and regulating your motivation for learning, your behavior during learning, and also your cognition, your thinking process during learning. So self-regulated learning is about us being in charge of our learning and playing an active role in regulating our motivation, our thinking during the learning, and also our behavior. How do we actually carry out that learning? So that, in a nutshell, is what I would say self-regulated learning is about. And I think it's very important now that we are not in school and the teachers are not with us, and we have to be in charge of our learning.
Thank you so much. So in the self-regulated learning, is the student who is in charge of the learning process. He plans, and then he monitor his performance, and then he make adjustments. Okay. So
yes.
This leads to the next question. So how can students then use that process of planning your task, monitoring and adjusting in time like this, where most higher education institutions have shifted to online classes?
Okay, so let me just to kind of summarize what self-regulated learning involves. We normally talk about it involving skill and will. So if you think about skill, it's the capacity to do, how well you can do the actual learning. So there's some skill that you need to have, and it's not that you need to have, but it's something that you gradually develop and sharpen. So self-regulated learning, you can improve in your process of being able to self-regulate when learning. But for you, part of what also interacts with that skill is what we call will. And that's where the issues of motivation, the issues of persistence, the issues of resilience. So when difficulties come around, you will still push on. So those two things play around together. And so when you're talking about the current shift of learning to online learning, of course, we are in a situation where the teacher doesn't have to come to class so that you realize, oh, it's time for learning, or the teacher doesn't have to be in class to say, keep quiet and do your studies, or the teacher doesn't have to even be there to monitor that you are studying and maybe even check whether you have understood what you're studying. So you can see now that we as learners have to play a bigger role. And I just want to say that even though we are being forced by the pandemic to do so, I want to say that we should see this as a blessing in disguise, because essentially as you move from one level to another in learning, from undergraduate into master's into PhD, ideally the control is left to you. There is very little that the teacher or the supervisor will do to you. So I really want us to celebrate this opportunity so that if we actually build and improve our capacity, we'll be positioning ourselves for higher engagement, not just in school setup, but even in work setup.
Yes, I like there's something that you said. It's prepare you for your masters and PhD, where you will have less control from your instructor, from your school, and this also touches something that is really important about, which is owning your journey, like owning your learning journey. And I think with self-related learning, one of the key components, owning your journey. Thank you so much. And I would like the next question I would like to ask is, what strategies? So you see, with online learning, the online learning comes with challenges, and some of the challenges include poor internet connectivity, distraction where you are on your own, and sometimes the lack of IT devices, smartphone. So what strategies can students use to minimize those setbacks and achieve their learning goals?
Learning goals. Thank you very much, Ella. Very good question. And I guess it connects to that the part where I say that self-regulated learning is actually an interplay of skill and will. And it is the will part that is actually important in helping us overcome the challenges that we might face. And this might be unique depending on the setups that you find yourselves in. So right now, as you're saying, in the context of online learning, where our reliance is on online engagement, as you've rightfully said, there are a number of key challenges that come up, especially in our setup, in our setups. And one of them is internet connectivity, as you said, and that's a critical thing. If you're going to be online, you need you need internet connectivity to access some of the information that you need. But I guess in terms of dealing with that, there has to be some planning around that. I believe, of course, you need some internet connectivity. So you have to be able to know how to efficiently and effectively use the resource in terms of how much internet connectivity you have. And I think it also talks about some strategic engagement. I'll give an example. You say that I am in charge of teacher training, and indeed I'm in charge of teacher training, and currently we are actually doing online training for over 2,000 teachers who are connected to our online training. And they're not in Kigali, they are across the country, from Rusizi, Nyamasheke, Gisagara, whichever district, a number, 14 districts in total. And you can imagine that, yes, they face the problem of internet connectivity. So sometimes it's not that you don't have the money to buy the bundles, because you could have the resources to buy the bundles, but the internet is a challenge. And that's where the will part will have to come in. You'll have to ask yourself, where is it? What location might I have to move to be able to access better internet connectivity? And when I get there, what do I need to do? Perhaps you want to download all the stuff that you need to use so that you can come back to the comfort of your home. I have teachers who sometimes tell me they have to climb up the tree. And so sometimes we are online and they're like, no, let me run. I have now reached the forest and I can actually be able to access internet better. So there's a sense of that push. So long as you have the goal in your mind, then you must not sit back and say, oh, internet is very poor here and what am I going to do? You need to identify what's the alternative. Is it a small cafe that you have to go to and very quickly buy? Sometimes I will tell you, way back, I was working on a project and I didn't have internet. And I had to do something which led to my PhD. And what I used to do is that I used to walk to this restaurant. It was a distance away from my house. I would buy myself one bottle of Coca-Cola because, and then it would allow me to use the free Wi-Fi. And I would sip this Coca-Cola for almost a whole day, just to ensure I could stay there and use that Wi-Fi. So you have to think about what's your situation and really solve it, either by getting the right location if you have the bundles, or identifying what opportunities exist for you to access it free. So do you have to buy a cup of tea and sit somewhere and access free Wi-Fi? Do you have to stand somewhere strategically? And during that time, you have to be very, you must have planned. You can't go there and then you don't know what it is that you're going to do. So before you left the house, you must have planned that I need resource A, B, C, D, and I need them for this goal that I need to achieve, but I need to access them through online. I need to download them. So I'm going to walk into that hotel. I'm going to buy myself one cup of tea, or I'm going to position myself, and I'm going to download this very fast so that I ensure everything is downloaded. And then after that, if you have to sit there to continue, or you pack up and go. So some strategic planning and push the will part. So that's one of the things that I would say. But the other thing is also to know what are the different ways of interface. So it could be that you need to download stuff, but you also need to interact with people. So right now, when I'm working with my teachers, we can't have a lot of calls and conversations. So we're using WhatsApp a lot, and we're using WhatsApp for training. And so we are able to plan and know that you're going to do training on this. The teachers may have reviewed that. We have questions that are going to guide the conversations. We have to use it efficiently, because the WhatsApp might need less internet connection than if I was calling on Zoom or something. And then sometimes if we want some sense of connection, in addition to text, I might build in and send a voice note. So you just have to know what what platforms do you have, and how can you use them to in a way that they complement one another and gives you the best, helps you to achieve your goal, either in terms of downloading resources or interacting with your friends. In terms of distraction, that's a key thing. In fact, when we talk about self-regulation, we actually say that you need to regulate 3 components. You need, there are models that talk about you regulating personal regulation, which will be about regulating your cognition, your way of thinking, your motivation during the learning, and your sense of self-efficacy, or the sense of I can do this. So you have to regulate that. Because if you feel disinterested and you get to disconnect, or your mind gets distracted, then you're not going to learn. So that's personal regulation. But then we have the part of where we talk of behavioral regulation during the studying. How do you track whether you are studying? How do you observe yourself? You could decide you're going to take notes, or you're having questions that you're going to try and answer in bits and pieces to really ensure that you are actually learning what you need to learn. So there's a process of regulation in terms of the actual studying. But then we have environmental regulation, and that's where the issues of distraction comes in. How do you ensure that the environment within which you're going to study is conducive to you? There are those of us who study very well in noisy places. There are those of us who cannot study very well in noisy places. There are those of us who will be distracted if the people next to them are not studying. So you need to be able to plan yourself and put yourself in the place or in the time that you know you will study best. And when I'm talking about this, I'm reminded of, and it's a very sad situation, but I'm reminded of the Nigerian university student from Benin City in southern Nigeria. I think we had a case at the beginning of this whole pandemic, the lady, the student for microbiology, who was called Vera. And we know that she was raped and killed in a church. And I read an article about that. And her sister said that she had left her house to go to the church to study, because there was too much noise in their home. And the other people were making noise. So Vera she actually made a decision, a very important decision in self-regulation. You need to choose the right space to study. But of course, going back to the story, then we also have to be very cautious about that. But you cannot, environmental regulation is a key part. You need to decide if your home is noisy, because some of the things you're not in control of. I will tell you, as I grew up in a place where there was always so much noise. There was this person singing and this person praying and this person doing that. And so it was not possible for me to study during the day. So one, I either left the house and walked miles and miles, this was at secondary school, to go to the library, because the library was silent. Then I came back in the evening and I waited until all of them had slept, and then I would sit down quietly and do my study. So you have to just know what is your environment and work with it, because we all come from different homes with different challenges. There could be kids, there could be your sisters putting on the TV, and you can't just stop them. So you have to find a way of that. And finally, as you talked about lack of smartphones, sad situation, but again, you have to find a way about it. Is it going to be your sister's phone when she's asleep, and therefore you can now borrow her phone and use it to download the stuff that you need to download, or to peruse through the stuff that you need to peruse through? I am hoping that in addition to the smartphones or online part, you might also still have some printed literature, but this is something you have to work around. You have to find ways of borrowing your parents' phone and finding time to use it when they're not using it, or going to places where maybe you can access other gadgets at a specific, like a library that might have computers, or in the village, just find out who is that person who has their phone and talk to them in a nice way, so long as it's ethical, and find time to use that phone. But I hope eventually everybody can get their smartphones, because it's really important in this period. Thank you, Ella.
Thank you so much. This was really great, great advice and strategies. Just what I've just realized is, whenever there is a will, there is a way. Hearing teachers going up to the mountain to search to search internet, because there is that will to find alternative way to get what you really want. This is something really, really important. Being looking for resources that are around you, use them to maximize them. That is really, really, and also that knowing like, maybe you are good, you can focus really good during the night. Maybe maximizing that time. Yes, thank you so much for these great tips. So you talk a little about how you have teachers training them, and my next question will be around that. So what strategies can students use to build a sense of community in their learning journey? And as we have seen, social media, the wonderful community you have built with your teachers. So what can we learn from that?
Thank you, Ella. I think this is a really important question, because sometimes when we talk about self-regulated learning, we imagine that, it just has to be me, being in charge of everything, and everything rotates around me. But actually, what we've come to realize is that as much as we're talking about self, that self is normally anchored around, I would say, co-regulation. So in most cases, especially in our culture, the sense of community is really important. And at the stage where the students, let's say, are either at high school or at university, issue of your peers is a key part in most of the things that we do. More and more at that stage, we tend to listen more, and we tend to model our life more sometimes around what our peers are doing. So being able to tap into that as a resource and not as a distraction is something that is very important, because it could play around either way. As I said, self-regulation is a skill that can be fostered. You can grow into it. And it is something that you can do very well and perhaps not do so well. And there are so many factors that could contribute to that. And when we talked about environmental regulation, part of that, what is within your environment will be your friends. So the first question here is, how can we tap best into our friends and maybe build a community? Because when it is a community, it means we are a group of people. We have a sense of a common identity, and we also have a sense of a common goal. So if it is a community that is supporting your online learning, then it means part of the connecting fibers is that learning process. So you can't say you're going to form a community, like I am working with teachers. I can't say I'm forming a community with another person who is not a teacher to help build or support my teacher training. So the first thing you need to ask yourself are, who are your friends? Do you have some friends that are also at the same level where you are, or have some interest towards learning? Because they can really be a key resource. They might not be learning exactly what you're doing, but it actually helps if it is somebody who is also doing a similar course or at the same level. So going back to my teachers, so for my teachers, what we have done is that for us, because of structure, we have organized them into groups, and we are using different platforms. So first of all, what is really fueling or driving the sense of connectivity and community is first and foremost the fact that we don't just see ourselves as teachers, but there's a common identity that has been built amongst ourselves. We see ourselves as teachers who have a common goal. We are part of the AIMS teacher training program. So that gives us an environment to tap into each other. So if I might practically talk about it now for us as students, there are a number of factors that will contribute to how best to use communities. Let me first of all talk about some self factors, and then I'm going to talk about the sense of identity you have. There are those of us who have a sense of an interdependent identity. I find meaning in my learning by associating it with somebody else doing the same learning. Now, if you are that kind of person, then it is actually very critical that you find people that you connect with that have also a similar goal for learning, because that helps to drive you. when you see somebody else. And that's part of how classroom works. When we do online learning, and this can be a different conversation with the universities, how do they then fashion the online learning? One of the things we have to remember that is in the classroom, by seeing somebody else sitting next to you and they are also seated there to study, it creates a motivating or stimulating factor for you to also listen to the teacher. Now the challenge here now is where you are alone and people next to you are not necessarily studying, then there is a problem. So that's why you have to create a connection where you have another friend. He or she may not be physically be with you, but as Ella said, within the social media network, you can have some conversation around what it is that you're doing. Have a conversation. What I do, because even during this period, even me, I have registered into courses that I have done and I have completed. And part of what I've done is, if you follow my Twitter page, many times I will keep posting. And I will tell you during my PhD, they say is a very lonely journey, and especially if you're doing it outside the country like I was doing. In most cases, it is just you and your computer. There is very little interaction. There is nothing like a classroom. You don't have classmates. It's just you and your research. So it can be a very lonely journey. And I remember during those 4 years, one of the things that I did was to actually tap into social media. So I was quite a bit on my Facebook, and what I used to do is that I used to try and give a report of what it is that I'm going to do. So I'm like, today I have to work on my research methodology chapter and I have to be able to do ABCD. And what was I trying to do? I was putting it on the Facebook platform so that within that space, there are people who would come in and say, oh, Herine, go for it, go for it. But also it was a form of accountability, because I have told people that today I'm going to redo my research methodology chapter. There was a sense that I have to do it because I've set the goal and the people expect me to do it. So one of the things that you could do practically with your friends, and you don't even have to have a discussion, is just making your learning part of the conversations you sometimes have on your platform. It's like, there's this chapter I'm really trying to figure out, and I've given myself 2 days to figure it out, and you post it out there. So your friends will come in and make comments. Some of them might discourage you, but your friends will come in and make comments and say, go for it, go for it. That's motivation. There's a little bit of extrinsic motivation that should help sharpen your inner motivation to go for it. And what I always did is I came back and reported, and I would say, oh guys, I said I was going to do my methodology chapter. Believe you me, I only wrote 1 sentence. I was not able to do it. But I am committed to do it next time. So there's a sense of accountability and there's a sense of a push. So that's one of the things that you could do, but it's very important to check who your friends are. The other thing that could happen if you have friends in your classroom is give each other goals, like decide you're going to read this particular part together, and that's what we're doing with our teachers. So we are having the same thing that we are focusing on, all of us. And then we have time when we come on WhatsApp to have some conversation around it. And that time is scheduled. It's an appointed time. So it also gives you an external goal. The goal is no longer just yours, but the goal is now collective. It is for the community, because you know you have to cover this part, because tomorrow at 10 o'clock, you're having a WhatsApp conversation where you are discussing the things that you gathered from that reading. And during that process, you can talk about what you understood, you could talk about what you did not understand, and your community could actually help give you a different point of view from the way they interacted. So those are some of the things we're doing. The other thing I do with my teachers, which is also important in self-regulation, is the issue of evaluation and kind of praising yourself for doing it. So you'd be like, when I finish my course, I would put my certificate, or I would say, I finished week 1. So you're praising yourself, but the other people are also praising you. That's giving you energy to keep going. So those are some of the things that we're doing with our teachers. I keep telling them who is doing very well, which WhatsApp group, which district is doing very well, where is this WhatsApp group, and that is helping motivate everybody and keep everybody focused. And so you can build those things for yourself as a student. Make your study public. And one thing I will say, it's always important to look for help when you can't understand something, and that's another thing you could do with your community. I was trying to study this and I can't figure it out. One of the things I discovered about the difference between the Western people, I would say from other countries like Europe and the UK, and people from Africa, there's a little bit that our culture, we were brought up to think making mistakes is bad, not knowing something is bad. So normally when we study and we can't figure it out, we tend to struggle alone. And one of the things I found with the guys in the UK and the West is that they're very loud about even what they don't know. So they're trying to do something, they can't figure it out, they post it out there. And before you know it, 10, 20 people are sharing ideas of how they could figure it out. So there's a lot of academic conversations going on the platform. Feel free and share and talk about your achievement, but also talk about your struggles and let people jump in to help you figure out some of the things. And it becomes a very exciting process because yes, it is self, but you're not alone. Thank you, Ella.
Wow, thank you so much. That's great. That's great advice. The thing of accountability, having accountability partners, really, I know there are so many people, including some of my friends, who couldn't give up on a goal because they had accountability partners. Someone who was going to ask you, how are you? Where far are you with your goal, with your learning? This is something really, really, really important. And also praising yourself, like acknowledging the small progress you have made and say, this is great. It motivates you. It also increases self-confidence, and at the end of the day, this journey is going to be great. Thanks so much for great advice. So if you have a question that you would like to ask Dr. Otieno, please feel free to write in the comment section. She will be glad to answer your question. My last question, and then we are going to open to the public. If they have questions, feel free to write in the comment section, and just after this question, we are going to take your question. Dr. Otieno, if you could give any additional advice to students with regard to online learning, what would it be? You have really great experience with online learning, so like to hear from you.
I think the first advice is to know that there are different ways of presenting the same knowledge. So the beauty of online learning is that you can always compare how different people have explained different concepts. So if you come across, or let's say you are reading something or your lecturer is presenting something and you really seem not to follow what it is that they're saying, the beauty is that you can always search it elsewhere. I mean, Google, my teachers keep saying Uncle Google or Auntie Google. You can always ask Auntie Google or Uncle Google and find other similar illustrations or examples or explanations. So try not to limit yourself to just one resource. Try to find out what other resources might be there that might help you crack the things that you don't understand. And even if you understand, it is always valuable as a scholar to find out if there are different ways of presenting it and the different ways, there are different ideas. So that's one thing. The other thing is, as I said, the issues of planning yourself and knowing what it is that you really want at a specific time, having a goal for your study, because online resources can also be very destructive. There can be so many, you want to go here and you want to go there and you want to go there. So if you did not have a specific plan before the time that you're studying, then you can really easily get distracted. The other thing is about active engagement. I will confess that, well, I love reading. And of course, I read mountains and mountains of journal articles, but I always prefer the printed versions. I will confess that. And the reason why I always prefer the printed versions is because I can underline when I'm reading. I can put question mark when I come across something that I really don't understand. I can write a note to say, I need to check this out. So that's, I found very, I find that I can do that very easily with printed work. So what I'm trying to say is that if all we're going to do is online engagement, make sure you are an active listener, an active participant. You can pause, ask yourself critical questions. That's why we're talking about behavioral regulation. Are you really tracking what it is that you're reading? It's not about so much about the volume, but it's about being able to track what it is that you're reading. So I think, yes, online learning can be boring. That's for a fact if you are used to having people around you and interacting with people, but build other mechanisms, as we have said, to try and build that life to it. I think enjoy yourself. Don't do it like a punishment, because there's something we talk about, academic emotions. If the emotion that you bring to the study is a negative emotion, which is perhaps boredom, there's actually an interaction between your emotion and your brain. And if the emotion is negative, it actually has an hindrance into the cognition process. So find ways of psyching yourself. It's okay also to feel challenged and to find something difficult. That's actually positive. Just look for help through your friends, through additional resources, and keep tab of what you're doing. Have a plan at the end of the day and find out how much of it you achieved. And please don't be frustrated. Many times we write 10 items and we end up doing only 3. So that's very normal. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Otieno. That's very great. The last part that you said about it can be frustrating, but you can look support from your friends and your family, to just to get energy back and then go back to track again and continue the learning journey. Yes. Thank you so much. Don't know if there are questions from the audience. If you have a question, please write in the comment section. If there is any question from the audience. Please feel free to write your question in the comment. Okay. Currently, there is no question from the audience. There is no question from the audience. Okay. I think we can end the live from here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ella. I think I just want to perhaps as we close, maybe go back to where we began from, that if we are talking about life skills and 21st century skills that we have to build and sharpen and hone and be good at, this is one of them. And remember, self-regulated learning is just a branch from self-regulation. And we know that even as individuals, that issue of being able to regulate yourself, being able to create borders and to be conscious of what it is that you're doing and to plan around that is key to being a productive human being. So I just want to say that I want to encourage all our learners as they are forced into this situation with online learning. I believe on the other side, there's quite a bit of conversation that we can have with the policymakers and the institutions themselves, especially, because even as we think about the student engaging with online learning, then it also creates some demand on the other side for the people who are actually putting together the courses. How do we put together the courses in a way that could actually help facilitate and make it friendly towards self-regulated learning? But while that conversation might also be useful with the people who are putting together the lessons and all that, I just want to tell the students that, of course, we know that knowledge, there's a reason why you are in school. There is, you have a vision and a dream for yourself. Always keep that at the back of your mind. and so you have this big vision. So maybe you want to be a banker or something, but every day when you wake up, please always see the connection between you sitting down and working on your study and that big dream of you being a banker somewhere. And so it is an investment that you're putting in place. And as we say, practice it over time. Try to create a pattern for yourself. But again, too much play without, too much work without play, they always say makes Jill a dull voice or a dull person. So it's not about sitting the whole day. So also being able to plan, to know when you are having your breaks and what is it that you do to kind of step down, so that you've really been into this. There's a sense of saturation. You must be able to know when you need to stop and take your time out, do something in the house, or hang out with your friends, or listen to music as if that's what you want to do. So break is also very important. So planning yourself around this is not just about planning about what you're going to study, but trying to figure out your whole life, because the learning is a core part of everything else you are doing. So planning is very important. The skill is very important. Try to read about some of these things, like what does it mean to be an active, what does it mean to read actively? What does it mean to listen actively? Because you will be listening and you'll be reading a lot. And that, because there's a skill part. There's a sense that sometimes we think it's just about hard work and pushing, but we need to be skillful. And some of these things already exist. You can read and sharpen your capacity of how can I be a better active listener to be able to track out the important points. It could be that you have an objective, you have questions at the end of it where you turn the objectives into questions, you look at them before you start studying, so that at the back of your mind, you have a sense of what are some of the key things you're trying to extract from that body of knowledge. And when you come across a section that is addressing that key thing that is connected either to the objective or a question that you saw that you need to answer at the end, you'll find yourself zeroing in and paying attention. So I'm always very excited to talk to students who are actually engaging with their studies, because I think it's something really enjoyable. Really important, and hopefully it can be enjoyable. And yes, there will be obstacles, but that's when we bring in the other side of will. So we plan ourselves around, we go up the trees or position ourselves, but just be careful when you're doing all that, so that you are safe and you get the best out of your online process. And yes, use your social media constructively, have fun, but let it be part of where you celebrate and you also talk about your struggles and your joys of learning. So thank you very much for having me, and I hope this was useful and it can help us be better students and get much more from what we're doing now through online learning. Thank you, Ella.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yes, as you said earlier, online learning offers a lot of opportunities. Into internet, there's a lot of there's knowledge that you can get free, and if it's not distraction, and also the thing of finding a balance. It's not always about studying, but also remember to take a break, because at the end of the day, if we do not take a break, it will affect our productivity and our online learning journey as well. Yes. Thank you so much for this great advice. It was really a pleasure to have you this evening. And thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for the great advice that you have shared with us. Hope the audience and students will use them in the online learning journey and enjoy, as you say, enjoy the journey, and improve as well, and become the best version of themselves. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ella, for having me, and thank you, everybody. All the best with your studies.